Hello, I'm Wayne from TorqueCars. We're going to have a chat about tyres. Think about the tyre as the only point of contact between your car and the road surface. So the only way of transmitting the power, the handling, the braking is through the tyres. So never overlook the importance of your tyres. So in this video we're going to look at how to choose an appropriate tyre. There's a dizzying array to choose from. We've got summer and winter and all season tyres. We've got track day tyres, slicks, semi-slicks. There's so many different options out there. We're going to break that down and look at how to choose the best tyre for your car. We're also going to look at the numbers on the side of the tyre and what they tell you, the important takeaway information, and how to compare different brands of tyres. And is it worth going with a well-known expensive brand, or is there some merit in buying cheaper budget tyres? So we're going to look at all of the pros and cons in those. First of all, we're going to look at the numbers on the side of the tyre, because these typically are the most important thing when you go to buy a tyre. You want it to fit your car. So there was a genius that came up with the idea of keeping everyone happy when defining these measurements that go on the side of the tyre, because the first large number is in millimetres, the second smaller number is a percentage, and then you've got inches. So that larger number in millimetres, that's the cross section across the tyre. The slightly smaller number is a percentage of that width, which shows the height of the tyre, or the depth or the profile of that tyre. And then the final number, the inches you've got, that matches the rim size. So you clearly need to get a tyre that will fit your rim. You can't fit smaller or bigger tyres to a standard rim. Although there's a little bit of wiggle room when it comes to the width of the tyre and the profile, so we've got a little bit to play with there. But generally the manufacturers will specify an optimum selection of tyre. Another important marking on the side of the tyre is the load rating. Now they used to show how many ply there were in the tyre and the construction. You often still get an R to indicate it's a radial construction. You'd never mix radial and the older cross-ply tyres, but thankfully most of the tyres you get nowadays are radial and they're consistent. But the load rating actually shows you the amount of weight that tyre can carry. So depending on how they've constructed the tyre and how many little layers of reinforcement there are inside it, it has a big bearing on how much load that tyre can carry. So we often also see a speed rating for a tyre. We'll just pop those up on the screen now so you can have a look at the various popular speed ratings of tyres. Now you might be thinking, I never drive at 150 miles an hour. Why do I need a tyre that's rated for that? Well, it's more than just the top speed, it's the load. So if you've got a car capable of 150 miles an hour, you're putting a certain amount of stress from the torque of the engine into the tyre every time you accelerate, every time you brake and on cornering. So that speed rating takes into account those loads, and it's a tested maximum speed. So the tyre will usually perform beyond that level. But when you come to doing lots of high speed or track day driving, the temperature in the tyre builds up quite a lot, and that can affect significantly the structure of the tyre, how stable that tyre is. So it makes a big difference. So it really is important to just make sure you have the appropriate speed rating for your car. And if you've tuned your car and upped the power, it certainly makes sense to go to a slightly higher speed rating to cope with those extra stresses and strains that all that extra torque is putting through the engine. So the load rating is per tyre. So if you've got a car with 4 tyres, which is fairly average, there are obviously other options around, you multiply it by 4 to get the overall load rating or maximum weight of the car. So a 66 load index is 300 kilograms, or a car up to 1,200 kilograms. 108 load index is 1,000 kilograms, or a car that can weigh up to 4,000 kilograms. There's also often icons, typically a mountain icon on the side of the tyre to show if it's optimized for driving in wet or wintry weather conditions, and some countries may use some sort of snowflake icon to indicate a winter tyre. So which season tyre should you go for? Summer tyres typically have a 20% shorter stopping distance in the summer when the roads are dry, but the downside is they don't perform anywhere near as well in the wet. So your stopping distance could end up being 20% worse in those weather conditions. A winter tyre is exactly the opposite. In winter times, your stopping distances will be 20% better, but as the weather warms up and the road is dry, those winter tyres perform much worse and can add 20% to your braking distance. So are all season tyres good in both seasons? Well, they're not brilliant in both seasons. They're a compromise. So rather than lose 20% of your grip in the winter or lose 20% in the summer, they're set up to give an average amount of grip all year round. So in a country like ours, the UK, we get a lot of rain, a lot of cold weather, but not extremely cold weather. It would certainly make sense to go for an all-season tyre. In other areas, there might be a much bigger demarcation between summer temperatures and weather conditions being dry and winter wet weather conditions, and you get lots of snow and ice and extremely low temperatures. So in those instances, it really does pay to have two sets of tyres, one biased towards the summer use and one biased towards the winter use. Now you might be saying that's going to cost me a lot of extra money, but actually you're doubling the life of your tyre. You're not burning up your winter tyres in summer because it's a softer compound and wears more quickly. And you've got two sets of tyres, so that's twice the lifespan on those tyres. It's obviously going to depend a lot on how important performance is to you in each of those seasons and how much driving you do. We've seen people get an extra set of alloy wheels so they can just unbolt the wheel and put the new wheel on with the new tyre as the season changes, which makes a lot more sense than having to take the car to somewhere to have the tyres taken off and placed on. The other issue is obviously storage of those wheels, but it really is worth it. And until you've actually used a winter snow tyre in the snow, you do not realise just how good they are. They significantly improve traction and braking and can be a real lifesaver. So when you're buying a tyre, most countries have got some sort of rating system that show the wet grip, the fuel efficiency, the rolling resistance, the noise of the tyre, and a low fuel consumption tyre can actually save about 6% of your fuel. It's got a lower rolling resistance. But often lower rolling resistances mean slightly less grip, slightly less performance. So you can see where we're going with this. There's always a compromise when it comes to choosing a tyre. And also as the tyre wears, the characteristics can substantially change. For example, a car tyre that's quite near to the legal minimum is brilliant in dry weather in the summer. They use slick tyres on race cars for a reason, because you've got the maximum tread contact patch with the ground. But as soon as you get water in there, that water is not dispelled and the car will aquaplane so much more easily. We've seen some people get new tyres for a track day and actually shave off some of the tread so they've got the optimum tread depth to give them the maximum grip. You'll find also that a lot of these track day tyres and semi-slick tyres are made from a much softer compound, which is much more grippy. So it doesn't do great for your fuel consumption, but you're not going to a track to measure your fuel consumption. You're going there to enjoy the car's performance. So to eke out every last little drip of performance, it really does pay to get a softer compound and something that's designed for being used on the track. The tread patterns also significantly affect the tyre. So a lot of sports tyres have a directional tread pattern, so the tyre can only be fitted to rotate in one direction on the car. You'll typically see a V-shape tread pattern with fairly long blocks coming out into a V, which is brilliant for cornering and it also works quite well in the wet. But on an everyday road car you need stability, and depending on how the tread blocks are designed, whether there's a solid shoulder on the outside or across the tread pattern, it can significantly affect the straight line stability, the resistance to aquaplaning. So we're going to go into tread patterns in another video because it's a really big topic. We just really wanted to cover your choice of tyres and some of the common things to look out for, and the fact that all season tyres are not necessarily good in all seasons. They're just not terrible in off seasons where you've got the extremes of temperature. And there's a big difference between branded tyres and cheap tyres. Often they'll perform similarly straight out of the box, but as they start to wear, they will usually wear more quickly. I've had some branded tyres that have lasted me nearly 2 years, and I've had some cheaper unbranded tyres that I've worn out in 9,000 miles. Now, it wasn't 50% of the difference in the cost that I benefited, so in the long run I'm going to be paying a lot more on budget tyres. And those budget tyres, as they wore down, the grip dramatically reduced, whereas the branded tyres are designed to maintain their performance as the tread wears. They'll actually, instead of just cutting straight blocks into the tread patterns, it will be tapered so you get the same sort of performance as the tyre starts to wear. If your tyre pressures are wrong, you'll notice you get different uneven wear pattern across the tread. So higher pressures will typically wear the centre of the tyre out more quickly, and lower pressure tends to put the wear and tear on the edge of the tyre. So if you regularly measure the tyre tread depth across the tread pattern, you can actually determine whether you typically overinflate or underinflate your tyres. And for best performance, don't mix tread patterns across the axles. Try and keep the tyres the same on the fronts and rears. Look out for very cheap tyres. We wouldn't recommend you buy part 1 tyres. They often come from breakers yards where cars have been involved in accidents, so they might have heavy braking wear and flat spots on them, or they may not have been correctly maintained, or they may have been subject to repairs in the past. If you don't really know the history of the tyre, you need to be really careful. And remoulds is where they strip off the tread and they mould new tread onto the tyres. They're often cheaper, but we've heard a lot of people complaining about the longevity of these and the reliability and the tread patterns. It's often all done on the cheap. If it was me and my car and my family's safety, I would really want to invest in a good set of premium tyres. So we really hope that this video has been useful to you. It's given you a little insight into the world of tyres, and when you go and buy your next set of tyres, you're going to be informed and able to make an informed decision. So please stay tuned if you want to keep tuning your car and keeping it working at its optimum efficiency. If you haven't subscribed already, please do so. We've got lots of other interesting videos planned and coming up that you'll certainly find beneficial and helpful. Thanks for watching. Goodbye.